Good afternoon and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Stella Park and I'll be your host today, and our presenter is going to be Jonathan Su. In these monthly webinar series, you will learn from the best as our customer success team builds user-submitted forms. We're here to answer questions and educate you on the platform's capabilities. As we go on, it's important that all of you stay up to date and know what's going on at Zerion Software. So what we have done here is given 4 links that we think are really helpful for you to follow along and be aware of all the activity. So first we point to Zerion blog. This has a couple of articles every week, one of them being the Data Management Digest. Also, definitely join our community and see what's new and vote on some of these topics and see what's coming next to the platform. And the last 2 sections that we have here in the announcements are 2 channels we have dedicated to our engineering team as well as our customer success team. Finally, we have a variety of social media channels, and we would appreciate if you could subscribe, like, and share our posts on any one of these platforms. In particular, I want to highlight our YouTube channel, where you're going to find videos of previous webinars as well as short videos of building out different components of your forms and integrations that are available. I'm now going to hand the presentation over to John.
Thanks, Stella. Good afternoon, everybody. This is Jonathan Su here from Zerion Software. And as Stella introduced, I'll be your presenter for today's webinar. Now, I wanted to briefly go over the format of the webinar before we get started. This monthly webinar is going to take on the same format as it does every month. Basically, what happens here is we get requests from our community. Sometimes they come in through the community forums. Other times we get them directly through email or through our support team. But generally speaking, what happens is people will request forms to be built, and then I will take a sample of that form and build it out on the webinar so that you get to see some common form building techniques. I also get to share some best practices with you all. And then at the end of the webinar, you'll have the form package so that you can import it into your own environment, mess around with it, and then make it your own. Now, before we get started, I do want to launch a pair of polls. This first poll that I'm going to launch is just asking if you're a current user or not. This poll, along with the second poll, is going to give me a better idea of the experience that we have in the audience today. That's going to allow me to tailor the content a little bit more closely to everybody's needs. All right, there we go, that 100% mark. Fantastic. So just so that you guys know, I can go ahead and share these results. We have the majority of people who have an active iFormBuilder plan. We have a few people who are just here checking things out. For those people, welcome. Thank you so much for looking into iFormBuilder, and I hope that you learned something from this webinar today. The second poll that we're going to launch is now to describe your level of expertise within iFormBuilder. So we had that vast majority of people on this broadcast who are current iFormBuilder customers. Now let's get a feel for how much experience you have with the platform. So nearly half of our audience here is able to do things, or able to build forms that they cannot do on paper. We also have a heavy majority of people here who are either beginning form builders or they're confident at the lowest level of form building, which I like to call substitution, where you're taking your paper form and you're literally doing a one-to-one substitution onto a digital platform. Again, there is a small number of people here who are new or who are just data collectors wanting to learn how to build forms, and that's awesome. I'm glad you all are here. All right, so for this month's webinar, as I mentioned earlier, we always take requests from the community, and then we're going to use those as a basis for what we do on the webinar. For this month's webinar, I want to give a really big shout out to Nearstar Mining. I've been working with them closely over the last couple of months, and we've developed some pretty cool forms. I asked them the other day if I'd be able to share some of that with everybody in the community, and they were more than happy to oblige. So the form that we're going to be looking into today is an inventory checklist. And so what I have here is a real quick screenshot of an Excel spreadsheet that they use and they populate every day. Without getting too deep into the nitty-gritty aspects of mining, basically what happens is they have a whole bunch of inventory. In this case, it's different pieces of mining equipment. And they need to check every day to see if each of the pieces of gear is up or down, so if it's operational or not. If it is up, then they need to see if someone was assigned to it, yes or no. And this is all driving towards optimizing the performance underground so that they're able to utilize all the assets they have that are available in the most efficient manner possible. Now, I don't anticipate everybody on this call to be a mining expert, so what I've done for today's webinar and for this form is I've gone and generalized the content a little bit, but we're going to be covering the same high-level goals that Nearstar wanted to accomplish with this data collection piece with the webinar's content today. So let's break down this small project here. What's going to be happening is we're going to have one parent record. In the case of Nearstar, it's considered a shift, so it's going to be a time where they're doing work. And over this shift, the shift will last multiple hours. So we're talking, 7 hours plus. But within that shift, as you saw in the previous slide, they have all these different assets that they need to track. And in fact, I didn't even list them all here. So you can think of one shift having up to 100 child records. Every single record needs to be accounted for each shift. And so we're talking about a lot of repetitive data collection. So that is going to be the theme for today. We're going to be looking at how to use subforms for repeated data collection and how to optimize that experience, specifically for the end users. Some of the high-level goals we're going to be making sure we accomplish is we want to make sure that we don't have duplicate entries. Basically, you don't want to check the same piece of gear twice. You also want to make sure you have some sort of visual progress. As the person filling out the form, you can imagine if you fill out record 1, record 2, you're fine. But once you get down to, the 60th record or the 70th record, you want to have some sort of a cue as to what you just did to make sure you don't lose your place. And then finally, of course, when we're moving from paper to digital, we always want to make sure things are improving, they're getting better. So in this case, that means that the collection should also be faster. So we're going to look into ways to make the subform experience as fast as possible for the data collector. Now, generally in these webinars, I start from scratch. So I literally log into the iFormBuilder control panel and begin building there. I was a little worried I wouldn't have enough time to get through everything today. So I've actually started a portion of the form already, and I want to begin by walking you through it. So instead of looking at mining equipment, we're going to be looking at a list of participants today. And so what happens is we have our top level, our parent form, where we have a check-in date. And the idea is that we want to have a check-in with every single participant on our list. So this here is a subform where we will enter in an individual participant record. I have populated here an option list where the label, which is the text you see on the screen, is going to be a name along with a social security number in parentheses. So if I choose one of them, I then will say, are they present or were they absent? If they were absent, that means they weren't there, so the record is done. However, if they were present, then we're going to have a health rating, 1 to 5. So a very, very simple form, but it's going to be able to allow us to illustrate the concepts that we want to go through today. So I'll say 5, say done. Now I can fill out another record, and now we'll see right away one of the problems with this data collection as it stands now, which is you don't have any sort of data integrity with respect to the participants. Right now I've picked the same person for 2 records, and that's not a good sign. That's not something that we want to see happen. So how are we going to be able to fix this? Let's start by jumping into our form builder. Let me refresh everything to make sure I haven't timed out. And so what I have here is my parent form with a check-in date. This is a read-only field. And then my subform called participants. I then have in a second tab, which is a best practice of ours that we recommend, which is opening multiple forms in a separate tab per form. I have my pick list where I choose a participant and 2 selects underneath for the check-in, whether they're present or absent, and the health rating as a score of 1 to 5. Now the first thing we want to do is we want to have a quick visual cue to make sure that I don't fill in the same participant I just filled in. So we'll look at the case of double entry or doing a record twice by accident. What we're going to do here is we're actually going to add a label element. And the purpose of this label element is I want to keep track of the last record I submitted. So what that would mean is if I chose Jacqueline for the first record, when I open up the subform a second time, it should show me that that was the record I filled out most recently. In order to do this, we're going to have to work with not this label here, but we need to work with the dynamic label down below. And that is because the label will change based on the subform record we fill out. Now, before I get into typing out this actual solution, what I want to explain is the concept of an index. An index is a fancy term for just saying your position in line. If you think about a line at the grocery store and you are first in line, you have an index of 0. That's the front of the line. If there are 5 people in line, that means the indexes are going to go 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So the maximum index is always going to be one less than the length of the list. Indexes are used to keep track of subform records. So the first subform I fill out here would have an index of 0, and then they would increment by 1 after each one of those. So to look at the previous record, what I actually want to see is the index of my current subform minus 1. Keep that in mind because we're going to be working on that right now. So if I have this field here called participant ID, what I can do is I can do a ZC display key participant ID. Now this right here by itself is going to give me the key value of the participant list. Now the way I have the option list set up, this is actually just the social security number. So what we may want to do in fact is use the label, which is going to be ZC display value. So this would show the label. Now in order to get to the previous index, what we need to do is we need to use the form structure to our advantage. We're going to begin by taking the parent form name. I'm going to copy this to my clipboard and paste it. And after that, I'm going to separate it with a period, but we're going to look at the subform's data column name. So I now have participant check-in underscore P, the P stands for parent, which is a naming convention we recommend using, dot participants, which is my subform. Now inside the subform, we have our index, and that goes inside of square brackets. Now what is our index value going to be? We're going to have to take the current index, which is going to be the same structure I just typed in before, dot index, and we're going to subtract 1 from it. Okay? So let's go ahead and save this and check it out. Now one of the things you're going to see as we go through this form building process is I like to do a lot of trial and error, because specifically what you'll see is that form building is an iterative process. You don't get to measure once, throw in all your elements onto a form, and then it magically works the first time. Generally speaking, it's going to take a couple of attempts when you try to implement especially advanced techniques like this. And so I want us to work at it a little bit slower. So you'll see it says my element 3 right now, and as I choose an individual, let's go ahead and fill out this record. The expected behavior is that it should show Gail Adrian when I open this next record up, which we see here. Okay, so that's awesome. Now this doesn't tell us very much. We need to go ahead and give us a little bit more descriptive text around this. So where we have this now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the quotation marks to type in a character string. So this is just going to be static text, and I want to say last participant. And then the plus sign is going to be our concatenation operator, which is a fancy word for saying glue two things together. So we'll glue together the string last participant with the name of the person. Now, if we remember what happened at the very beginning, it said my element 3, which was the base label here. All we're going to do is say last participant and leave this blank for now. So that's what you would see on first load. And let me give this a label so we can be more explicit about our naming conventions for our elements. All right, let's give this a go. I'm going to go ahead and just delete this previous record I had. Let me back up, sync my device, and we'll open up the form again. So as I open up this form, we're going to go into the participant subform. You'll see it says last participant at the top. There's no one there. Let's choose somebody. And then we'll go ahead and pick another person. And we'll see it says the original person who I chose. Let's fill this out again. Let's choose another person. And then we'll keep on going. And you'll see that that is going to give us right there our small visual cue of what I just did, so that you're not going to pick the same person twice in succession. So this will help you keep your place in line mentally. Now, before I move on to the next part of the form building, Stella, I wanted to check in to see if there are any questions from the audience at this point.
Not so far. Looks like everyone's following well.
All right, thank you so much. So we just accomplished our first part of this this project breakdown. Is actually really more so the second part, right? The visual progress of data collection. Now, in order to make sure we completely avoid duplicating entries, The only way to do that is to actually have the option not show anymore after we select it. So to make this a little bit more clear, what I mean is after I choose Margareta from this list, the intended behavior is that she should not show up in this list again. So we would want this option to be hidden, right? Because right now, even though I see it there, I do still have the ability to have a double entry. And so we want to get rid of that. So that's going to be our next step. Get back out of here. And let's go back into the form builder. Now the way we're going to accomplish this is going to require a couple of different components that will work together. Again, advanced features are normally going to require some advanced configuration, but that's why we're here today. The first step of this is to actually include something in the parent form. Now we're going to do two things here. We're going to add some page level JavaScript, and we're also going to add a read-only element, which is going to be used to keep track of every single person we filled out so far. So the idea is when I fill out the record for one person, they should be added to this read-only. When I fill it out for a second person, they should be added to it as well. So I now have a running list of all of the different participants. I have this page level JavaScript opened up in a separate tab already. I'm just going to increase the size here and talk through this very quickly. So a page level JavaScript function is something that we don't add to a specific element, but rather we add it to the actual form itself at the top. It's separate from the elements. And what we can do is we can call this function inside of our smart controls. And at that point, the function is executed. So in this case, we're going to use it for the dynamic value to populate the read-only element. Now this function is going to take what's called an array, which is the programming term for a list, which uses that index I talked about before. So effectively our subform. It's going to take our subform, and assuming that everything is good and it exists and it validates, it's going to make a list of all of the participant IDs, and then it's going to join them with a comma. So each value is going to be separated by a comma. Now, if for whatever reason something is wrong here, it's not an array, I typed the name in wrong, or the subform hasn't been filled out, it's just going to return an empty string. So let's take this content, I'm going to copy it. And to get to the page level JavaScript, we're going to click on these curly braces in the upper right corner. And I'm going to paste this in here. Now, a really, really important distinction is that you have to put the page level JavaScript in the parent form. So even though I may use this function in my subform, I have to add it to the parent. So from here, let's add our read-only element. And we're going to call this list of participants. And I'll call the name participants list, be a little bit shorter. As I said in the dynamic value, I'm going to use the name of my function, aggregate option list, and I'm going to pass in the subform, which is again the parent form's name dot participants, which is the subform data column name here. Now let me go ahead and save this. And then as I sync my device, I did want to talk through one small detail, and that is inside of this form, or inside of this, page level JavaScript, I did a little bit of preemptive work, right? And what you'll notice here is that inside of the subform, I reference a value called participant ID that matches to the name of my pick list. And so this is important because if you're going to take this form package after the webinar and make it your own, it's important to know that you have to make a small modification to the page level JavaScript if you change the data column names. All right, so I've synced my device. Let's take a look here. And we see right now list of participants is empty. If I choose a participant, we go back, you'll see that the social security number, which is the key value, is shown in the read-only. Now let's go ahead and pick another participant. Okay. And as we go back, you'll see I get this comma-separated list of all of the different key values. Now, the reason I'm using a key value is because when you create an option list, a key value has to be unique. So it's a really good identifier to use inside of your list because you know it'll only show up one time at most. So now that we have this list of participants, let's go ahead and work on making the option list hide each value after it's been selected. I'm going to open up the option list manager here to speak through this for a second. Now, as I find my participants option list, there's this value called condition value here, and this is a smart control that handles the visibility, both of elements as well as options. Now, the way condition value works is if the condition value is true, then what happens is the option or the element will be shown. If the condition value is set to false, or it's a JavaScript expression that evaluates to false, then it's going to be hidden from sight, so you will not see it. The logic that we're looking for here is that if that key value is found inside of a list of participants, then we want to hide the option, okay? Now, the way we're going to do that is we're going to say participants, list dot index of, and then we're going to take the key value, and we want to make sure that this is equal to -1. Now, I just said a mouthful here. We're going to have to talk through all of this. First of all, participants list is the data column name of our read-only that has a list of all the key values. The index of method or function is going to search for whatever I put inside of the parentheses. So in this scenario, we're searching for 823564042. Now, if it finds that value, it's going to return the index, the position in line of that value. So it would be at the lowest 0, and then going on until however many characters or entries you have. In the event it does not find it, it will return a -1. And so that's what we want. If it's equal to -1, that means that we haven't selected it yet. That means we should view it. Let's go ahead and save this. And then let's sync my device and see how this works. All right. So as I'm syncing my device, Stella, another real quick check-in. Any questions so far?
Nope, everything looks good so far.
Okay. All right, so as I fill out this form, we're going to open up a new record. I will choose that top participant. So they're present, give them a 5 out of 5. And then let's back up. We'll see the key value is in there. Now, if I try to open up another record, we get this blank value, okay? Now, the reason that is blank is because this condition value was actually false, right? Because they were chosen. Now, the thing is, with a condition value for an option list, it functions very similar to a light switch or to a stoplight. Think red light, green light. Once it finds a false condition, it's going to assume everything under it is false until it runs into a true condition, in which case, once it's true, it flips, and then it's going to assume everything is true, moving on down until it finds a false condition. So because of that, what it ends up meaning is we need to put in another condition value below it. But instead of using the original key value, we're going to replace it with this row's key value. So let's do this. We'll confirm, we'll save, and then we're going to go back to the device and check this out. Let me go ahead and resync. So we're going to go through the exact same steps. We're going to start by choosing the first participant, and then we'll do a second record and see if they are showing on the option list. So we'll go here, participant number 1, absent this time. Again, you see them on the list. Let's fill out another subform record. And this time you'll see they're not on the list. Now Jacqueline is the first one showing. Now, if I pick Jacqueline here, we're going to run into the exact same problem we ran into last time, where now it's false and nothing is going to show. The main takeaway here is that we're going to actually need a condition value for every single value in our option list. Stella, did you have a question?
Yeah, so Leah asked, can you make a list on separate lines instead of using a comma between the participants on your parent form?
Yeah, good question. So you can do you can use a text area and then use a line break to separate them. So you'd have one value on each line. That could absolutely be done. You would have to go in here and modify the page. Whoops, wrong form. Modify the page level JavaScript. So instead of joining each value with a comma, we would want to join it with a new line character. So you would do \n. Okay. Any other questions?
Good to know.
All right. So again, what this means is we're going to have to add a condition value for every single one of these rows. What I've done actually ahead of time is prepared that specific option list for us because I don't want to sit here and do that for the entire time of the broadcast. And you'll see here for the condition value, I have the data column name .index of 823, so on and so on, all the way down my list. So I have one for every single option. Okay. Now, a small detail, I did this on purpose here. If you noticed it, then good for you. You have a very keen eye for this type of craft. But the data column name inside the condition value is actually participants checked instead of what I called it over here, which was participants list. So what I can do is one of two things. I can either change the option list, or I can simply change this value here to call this what it is listed in the option list. So we'll have this as participants checked. Let's make this change here. Secondly, inside of my subform, I'm going to have to link to the new option list. So we're at participants advanced. We'll check our condition value one last time. Assign it. Save it. And now I'm going to go ahead and resync my device and see what we get. While this is syncing, Stella, it looks like another question may have come in.
So Joe asks, is there a faster way to populate all of those condition values than copying and pasting to each one?
Yeah, absolutely there is. And I'm glad somebody asked that actually. So I had mentioned that there are two main ways to go about making this adjustment. I admittedly took the easy way out and I just changed my data column name. However, one of the other things you can do is you can change the option list. So I can say, all right, I want this option list to say participants list instead of participants checked. Now, we could go in here and do each one of these manually. I highly recommend against doing that. What I actually recommend you do, and this is really the case for any option list, I would say honestly beyond like 20 options where you have to start doing manual edits, I like to keep my option list managed inside of a spreadsheeting tool. This here is Google Sheets. If you want to use Excel, that's absolutely fine as well. But you'll see what I have is a tab here for basic. This was the first option list we used. I have my label, my key value, my condition value, and my sort order. Now, I have my second tab here for the condition value with participants checked. You'll notice I used a function here where it says participants checked .index of concatenated with the key value. The great thing about doing this in Google Sheets is I can now change this formula. Let's say we want this to read as participants list. I make the change there. I am going to scroll down here, paste in my new formula, and I fixed my option list here very quickly. I can then go under File, do a download as a CSV, and then the final step would be to upload the CSV file and empty my options as I do so. So yeah, when it comes to managing larger option lists, absolutely use the CSV upload. It's definitely what I would recommend doing. It'll make managing your option list much, much easier in the future. You are able to leverage the power of spreadsheeting softwares as well to do those things faster. Any other questions, Stella?
Nope, everything's good.
All right, so let's hop back over here to my form. Sync should be done now. And we're going to look at my subform and see if I connected everything correctly. So we're going to choose a participant. Let's choose Josephina to start, absent. And then we will go back in here and you see that Josephina is no longer on the list. Let's skip Jacqueline. We'll jump straight down to Gail, present 4. And then we'll do another one. See, Gail is no longer on the list as well. Jacqueline wasn't here today. And what you can see is we can just keep on going. And we have this option list dwindling. And so this is going to allow us to fill out the subform very quickly over and over again. Now, as I hop back out to the parent level, one thing that I want to point out is that this list of participants is really not a data field, so to speak. Like, we're not actually collecting data in this. In fact, it's a read-only element. You can't even open it to begin with. So what I would recommend doing in these scenarios is taking that read-only field and actually hiding it. So we can use the condition value for an element this time, set this to false, and now this element will not show. However, the value will continue to be populated behind the scenes. All right, the very final piece of the form building that I want to go through today is how to actually speed up this process of filling out this subform. We're doing this over and over and over again, and that can become very time intensive. So what we're going to do is, for my subform, we're going to leverage what are called reference IDs. Now, the reference ID is definitely on the end of being more advanced of a use case. And basically what they are going to be is reference IDs are flags that you can set for certain elements or for certain form fields, and they modify the base behavior of that form or of that element. Now, for subform specifically, the reference ID I want to use is called subform batch mode. And what that is going to do is it's going to open up a new subform record each time I submit, instead of bringing me to that list view. So let's hop back over here. We'll do one more final sync of my form. And when I open this up, what you'll see is, assuming that we go through this day in the life of a data collector, I say, okay, here's my check-in date. I've got to now go through this long list of participants. All right, so I'm going to say Josephina first, present, for, and I press done. You'll see it's going to open up the form right away again. So now I can just go and pick another person, not here. I'm going to open it up again. Next person, not here. I again still have that visual feedback that I'm opening up a new record because the last participant chosen is going to change each time. I also have the additional benefit of the option list dwindling, so I cannot submit the same person twice. And this is going to give you a much faster speed of data collection. It may not seem like it speeds it up very much because it's just a very short form, but if you think about the aggregate total, filling this form out 100 times, it's definitely going to make a difference, and it's going to allow your data collector to have a better experience. Now, how do I get out of this batch mode? Good question. We're going to click on the X in the upper left corner, which brings us back to our table view. So it effectively ends the batch mode sequence. And then I can press on the back arrow to bring me to my parent level. Okay. From here, I could submit my form, pressing done, sync my device. And what will happen is only that bottom record is going to get uploaded because it was marked as complete. You'll see that hourglass icon. Those records above that I was using as testing throughout this form building process have a pencil icon, and that means that it is saved in draft mode. That means when I sync my device, it will not be uploaded to the cloud servers. It will remain on the device for now until it is completed. All right, you'll see it says 8 records were uploaded. That includes my subform records, and then 1 record was post-processed, and synchronization was successful. Okay. Stella, any questions come up for that last section of the form building?
Nope, looks like we're good.
All right. So I want to do a real quick recap here for everybody. I always like to assemble a quick list of best practices and strategies that we covered in summary for this webinar. The first one is that the index, again, is the position in a list. I always like to use that grocery line analogy. If you were the first one in line, you have the index of 0. Now, if you are the only one in line, so let's say a single paging subform, you still have a spot in line. It's just that it's 0 and there's no one else behind you. So if you're using this JavaScript for a single paging subform, you'll have to put in a 0 at a bare minimum. You can always use the naming convention we had before with the form structure, but if you know it's single paging, you know the index will always be 0 and you can reference it accordingly. The second best practice, you'll notice I have this up here. I anticipated the question that came in. but you want to upload optional lists as CSV files whenever possible, especially when you're going to be working with condition values or longer lists. It just makes the management of it much simpler. It also allows you to have a mechanism for making changes and uploading those changes very easily. Third, remember your condition value is going to control the visibility of either an option or an element. So add condition values to hide options you don't want to be shown. You can add condition values to elements as well to hide those that are not shown. Now, we had two examples in this form building webinar. For the list of IDs, I used the word false. That means it will always be hidden. On the other hand, for the options, I had an expression in there. I actually used a function. And so for that, it's a little bit more dynamic. We like to call that skip logic, where you're showing and hiding sections based on previous user input. My fourth strategy and best practice is to educate yourself on the reference IDs, because a lot of the times they modify the elements or the form in a very minor way, but it can make or break the difference in user adoption. Having those subform records filled out much faster is going to improve the quality of life for your data collector. They're going to buy into your solution more, and they're going to be happier using the platform. And then finally, the last best practice I have listed here is to always add your page level JavaScript in the parent form. It is a mistake that we see made very frequently. I make it very frequently too as well, actually. A lot of the times I'll be testing a subform, I'll put it in that form standalone, and then when I connect it as a subform, I forget to move the page level JavaScript. So just remember, anytime you're working with that page level JS, make sure you include it in the parent form and not in the subform record. All right. I want to thank everybody for taking the time to attend this webinar. We're always here for you, so just continue to join in on the conversation, whether that's through the community forums, our blogs that Stella mentioned, the Customer Success Center. We also do offer form building certifications. The next one that we'll be offering is going to be in October, so you can view our website for that. And then, of course, always sign up for our monthly webinars. They are always on the second Tuesday of each month, so sign up for the one in September. Stella, it looks like one final question came in.
Is there a list somewhere of all the varying reference IDs we can use and what they do?
Yeah, there is a list of it. It's actually on the Customer Success Center. So when you go ahead and visit the knowledge base, you can either search in the top, or you can use our chat bot and ask them about reference IDs, and you're going to be able to get the information you need there. I actually have that page bookmarked on my browser, along with a couple of other articles that I refer to a lot. Any other questions?
No.
Nope. All right. To close out this webinar, I do have one final poll for everybody. We're always trying to improve. We're always trying to take the feedback from people who are attending. And so if you could give me some initial feedback on this webinar, it'd be really helpful. This will allow me to fine-tune the content of these webinars month to month to make sure that it is what you all are looking to learn. And again, if you have specific feedback for us, or you have a form that you'd like to nominate yourself, please, please, please go ahead and send those to us. We're always looking for opportunities to engage with our customers and learn more about what you do. And it's a really good chance for you to also have a section of your form built by the experts over here, right? So we'll be able to do some work and help you all out, and then you'll be helping out and engaging the community as well. All right, we have just about everybody voting. I'll keep this open for a couple more seconds. Looks like for the most part, people felt that this was a challenging webinar, but they felt like it was informative. That's great. If any questions come up over the next couple of days, or when you're trying to review this, please post those in the community forums. Additionally, we're going to be releasing a recording of this webinar, as well as all of the webinar materials. So all of the forms, the form packages, the JavaScript, the option lists. You'll have all of that content at your disposal to try these things out and to listen to a recording of the broadcast as well. Okay, all right. I want to thank everybody for joining again. And as I said, we'll be sending out a recording, and we look forward to seeing you all at the next webinar. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great rest of the day.